Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Today, folks, we have Stafford Vaughan presenting Social Support Best Practices with Zendesk. Stafford is the author of the brand new O'Reilly book, Practical Zendesk Administration, Best Practices for Setting Up Your Customer Service Platform. We're very excited to have Stafford with us today to be able to present this webcast for you all. I will turn the program over to Stafford in just a moment, but first I'd like to go over some housekeeping tips to help you get the most out of today's webcast. You'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Stafford. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Stafford, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for him and we can make sure he sees them for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you may need to give it permission to access your account. It will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweets so you don't have to. And folks, today our hashtag is Zendesk, all one word. If you should have any problems during the event, please take a look at your help widget. If you continue to have problems, please post it in the group chat and one of our staff will help you right away. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is to close any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast and we'll have an archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Stafford for his presentation. Hello, Stafford.
Hi, Yasmina. Thanks for introducing me. So what I'm going to do, guys, and hello to everybody else as well there. Just going to set up my screen sharing so that you can see me there. So I'll introduce myself in a moment, but just before we get started, I wanted to give you some context on essentially why I decided to make this the topic for today's presentation. When I wrote the description, I said that there's a common misconception in the support community that support and social media are two different things. And that was almost a challenge to get you thinking about the fact that often what is the case is that a marketing department is going to be the people monitoring social media, but your support department within your organization are the people who are they're communicating with your customers in terms of their problems and helping them. And there's probably no reason to consolidate those functions into the same function and allow your support department to use social media. All that would be required would be to make that transfer, to make that easy for them. And so that's the purpose of today's webcast. So my name's Stafford, as Yasmina said. Just a little bit about me. You can probably tell I've got that Australian accent, but I do live in San Francisco now. Basically what I do is I set up training departments for organizations. I work for a company called CustomWare. We're about 11 years old. We've got offices spread around the world and over 100 employees. So I set up the Atlassian training department. I wrote the JIRA and Confluence and GreenHopper training courses. Also wrote the GoodData training program. But the most important one, of course, is Zendesk. And in the process of writing that training program and delivering training around the world, I ended up writing the book, the O'Reilly book. And so I'm very happy to be here talking to you and I guess covering one of the topics in the book. A couple of those logos are just sort of the most impressive people I've worked with over the years. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to be doing today, I've sort of split it up into three objectives. One is I do want to start by painting a picture for you. I want you to understand why is social media and support important, and I do that with a lot of facts rather than just giving you my personal opinion on it. Then I'm going to do a lot of demonstrations. I'm going to jump into the product and show you very specifically and very practically how to use the Zendesk tool to capture your conversations on social media and interact back and forth. But to me, it's not enough just to tell people what to do. It is quite important to talk about the best practices during that process as well. So we have a few topics at the end where we talk about the best practices and I give you some advice on how to make it successful. I did mention it's very practical, and that is true. Just like my book, I give a bunch of examples. I'll show you how to do it. By the end of today's webcast, you should be able to walk away and essentially go to your Zendesk instance and start setting it up to capture your social media. I do make a little bit of an assumption that you're an administrator on your Zendesk instance. My book is targeted towards administrators of the product. So when I go around and navigate inside the product, you'll notice that I do have administrator privileges. All right, so the first concept I want to just explain is I want to give you some numbers to give you some perspective on, when I say social support, what do I mean? Well, the fact is that when we did a study and we pulled data in from our studies and data in from other studies as well, we've discovered that 62%, so almost two-thirds of people have used social media for customer service. And to me, that's the most important number. It's not like 5% or the occasional person is using social media for customer service. This is actually the majority of people. What's interesting is that 76% of people also said they would use it more if they understood that they could, if the service was available to them, basically. In terms of understanding what people are using social media for, so this is you, this is your company, you can use it for things like brand reputation management, promotions, but customer service management is another very common usage, and you can see that a lot of people are using it for this purpose, and I think we're going to see it increasing as a dedicated purpose for social media, and risk management is the last use that people get from it. The different industries definitely have different prevalences of what's the most common use of social media. We do find that retail has by far the most customers who are using social media to communicate with the company, going all the way down to healthcare. So there are certain industries where it's not quite as prevalent, but I think that more and more this is going to increase as tools like Twitter and Facebook just become much more mainstream than they are. Speaking of the different channels and what's most common, in our study we discovered that 34% of the use of social media is sitting inside of Facebook. Twitter is the next highest one, and sort of the rest of them are below that. It's not a coincidence, the fact that Zendesk supports Twitter and Facebook as their social media channels. And so the topics for today's session will be Twitter and Facebook specifically. And lastly, when we think about Twitter, we broadly group the tweets or the tweets that our customers give into 4 different categories. It's sort of interesting to get this perspective, and to me the most interesting thing was that 48% of people are actually asking questions. So the whole idea is that people are asking questions. Are you capturing those questions? Are you joining the conversation? What else is interesting is the fact that when I looked at this bar chart, I couldn't think of any one of these specific bars where I wouldn't want to be capturing the conversation, because to me, regardless of what the customer is saying about your company, it's an opportunity to engage in a conversation with them. All right, so very quickly, I just want to put that into a few practical reasons for you to monitor social media. These are directly out of my book, so I'll go through them a little bit quickly. The fact is that people are doing it. I mean, that's number one for a reason. It's hard to avoid engaging with your customers using the method that they're realistically using. When we did the studies, we did find that 62%, and in fact, 19% of all tweets are for support. So 1 in 5. When I say there's a low barrier to entry, what I mean is that your customers are probably sitting on Twitter or they're sitting on Facebook because they're comfortable using that medium. If you make that medium a channel into your company, you're encouraging them to engage in that conversation, as opposed to saying you must email us to talk to us or you must call us to talk to us. Zendesk has 9 different channels, and the reason that Zendesk has these 9 channels is that we want you to feel, or we want you to give your customers the opportunity to be comfortable submitting a ticket any way they want. So low barrier to entry, customers just very, very knee-jerk almost tweet to your company sometimes. Third reason is this opportunity for positive publicity. And what I mean here is that if I go to a company's website and I see a conversation that they're having with a customer and they're helping that customer, I get a very real insight into understanding that this company cares about their customers. Same with if I'm looking at their Twitter stream and they're talking about, how can we help you? Did we solve your problem? Taking ownership to make sure the customers are happy. That's the positive publicity that comes out of using these social media. The fact is that social media is loud. So what I mean by this is that if a customer says, and I actually saw one of these on Facebook recently, where a customer, it was a large telecommunications company, wasn't happy with the service they received, or I think the company dropped a feature. That person just vented a little bit on Facebook and said, not happy this feature's been dropped. I think it's immoral for this, this pricing model to change in this way. There was like tens of thousands of shares for that on Facebook. And it can so quickly blow out of proportion, and suddenly it was all people were talking about. If as a company you don't get on that quickly and you don't say to the customer, hey, we understand your frustration, let's work with you to solve it, it could spin out of control. And so that's what you can do in Zendesk. You can engage in the conversation. The other piece is, it's sort of a personal story, but I occasionally, when I'm not happy with a company, will just out of frustration tweet, because I don't have the email address of the CEO of I don't want to pick on any specific company, but the CEO of every company. But if I want to try to voice my concern very loudly, I might go to Twitter. Now, when I do that, I don't generally expect a response. Like if I say, hey, had a really bad experience with your company, if they don't respond, my day probably won't be changed in much way, in many ways. If they did respond and they said, wow, that is not the experience we're striving for, we'd love to work on it, let's talk to understand how we can improve, I probably went from being a dissatisfied customer to an extremely happy customer. As long as the conversation was genuine, and so that's the other piece of advice. But there's this opportunity for you to be proactive about your conversations. 58% of customers said they expected a concern. So obviously me, venting on Twitter is I'm the minority here when I'm not expecting a response, but the majority of people do expect a response. If they don't get a response, they'll probably be disappointed. You can also broadcast announcements. What happens over a period of time is that as you embrace social media, you'll build a community, and that community will be thousands of followers on your Twitter stream, because these are people who are listening to what you're saying in a support context. What's interesting is that those 1,000 followers are an active listening ear. If you were to post another tweet to say, hey, we're having downtime, or did you know we've got this great new feature in the product, all those people who were previously engaging with you in a support context suddenly hear about these other features, and it's an easy channel to communicate with your customers. And finally, if you post something on your Twitter stream, such as, somebody says, how do I reset my password? You reply and say, you can reset your password by clicking this link. It's great because suddenly people are Googling, how do I reset my password? And it's on the Twitter stream. So it's there for the world to see. So you can distribute ideas when you have more voices listening. Now, of these 8 reasons, you might think, well, this is social media. So far, all we're talking about social media. But this is sort of my point. Social media and support, that line should be blurred. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you inside of Zendesk how to set this up so that your social media gets embedded inside the product. I'm going to jump into Chrome here. What I have is my Zendesk administrator screen right now. The first social media item I want to talk about is Facebook. Now, like I mentioned, we focus on Twitter and Facebook. The Facebook integration is a little bit more simple than the Twitter one. I think there's still some leaps and bounds to go in terms of the Facebook API. So there's an opportunity in future to improve that. So if I click Channels in the administration and then open up the Facebook option here and click Edit, what Zendesk is saying is you don't have a Facebook page linked. So just to explain this for a second, in Facebook you have this concept of a page, and it's a capital P whenever I write it. This is a corporate identity that you'll have on Facebook for your company. We also have Facebook profiles, and a Facebook profile is for an individual user. They're two different things. Unfortunately, in Facebook, you can't log in as a page technically. Like the page doesn't have a username and password. What you have to do is you have to log in as an individual user with a profile, authenticate, and then say to the Zendesk app, I'm going to authorize you to access my pages. You then go off and authorize the page, which I'll show you. And from then on in, that authorization remains active. So the person who gave the authorization is really only involved for about 10 seconds. So I'll click Add Your First Facebook Page. What it's going to do is it's going to jump me over to Facebook. And it's going to say, well, this is the app that we want to authorize so that we can link those two systems. I'll say, sure, go to the app. And then it gets more specific and tells me what are the permissions that it needs. And the key one is really managing your pages. Zendesk may log in as one of your 2 pages, including these, and then may post on your behalf, can access messages in your inbox. These are all necessary in order to set up the integration. So I'll click Allow. Once this is done once, as Stafford Vaughan on Facebook, the Zendesk app has now been approved. It's been authorized so that I don't have to take any extra steps in future. Jumps me back into Zendesk and says, okay, you're in charge of these 2 pages. You're an administrator of a page. Big P when I say page. Which one do you want to add? Now, if you're on the starter plan with Zendesk, you can add 1 page. If you're on the regular plus or enterprise plans, you can add up to 2 pages. But it's not an unlimited number. The options you have on the screen here are, do you want to pull in posts? Do you want to pull in private messages? The simple difference is that a post is something that's on the wall or on the timeline, I think we're starting to call it. And the private messages are when a message is sent directly to the page. That feature was only introduced a couple of months ago in Facebook, by the way, in case you haven't seen it yet. Importing recent activity, we'll just grab the post from the past week. I'll just click Add. I only want to add that one. I'll close this off. And now we have a Facebook page that's been authorized. Okay, we can change those settings, by the way, by clicking Edit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to Facebook, and I'm going to post on the wall. Easiest way for me to do this is just to click the Zendesk training link. It opens up in Facebook now. So I'm going to post. So I'm wearing my hat now as a customer. We'll say, hey, you're a Webcast. I'm trying to think of something that doesn't sound too bad. Webcast is going well. Looking forward to Twitter. By the way, I'm hoping that everybody else is thinking the same thing. Click Share. I actually created that one as I created a Stafford Vaughan. Perfect. Okay. So this is now sitting on the wall of Zendesk training. If you went there now, which you don't have to, you can see that on the wall there. It's totally public. It's not going to go into Zendesk immediately. It takes, I was testing this last night. It took about 30 minutes last night. Zendesk occasionally say it takes about 5 minutes, but it's hopefully not going to take any more than 40 minutes, so that by the end of this session, I'm hoping that we're going to get a ticket inside of Zendesk. Now, that conversation was obviously very public. As a next step, I can, as Stafford Vaughan, log into Zendesk. And to do this, as an administrator, we need to set up what's called social user management, social media user management, or social logins. There's a few different names for it. That's on the security link. The security link basically says Twitter and Facebook, and you've got a couple of other options. Do you want to allow people to log in with this? You might have seen this a lot on the internet. Basically, the way it works is that an industry standard authentication mechanism called OAuth is used to enable this. Zendesk is saying if the user can log in as a Twitter handle, and when I say that, I mean that if Twitter says to Zendesk, I trust that this is Stafford Vaughan because I've asked Stafford Vaughan to provide me his Twitter handle and his password, and that's all done inside of Twitter, and then it redirects back into Zendesk. If that's the case, the Zendesk says, I trust Twitter, I trust Facebook. That person doesn't have to have a password inside of Zendesk. And that's kind of neat because when we're talking about, social media, customers who are communicating with your company via social media don't necessarily want to create a new user profile. What they might want to do is just leverage their existing accounts. It's extremely secure. At no stage does the user at no stage does Zendesk get the password of the user when this occurs. What I might actually do, I'll jump over to support.zendesk.com, just check if I'm logged in or out. Let me log out. So, a good example of this would be if you're actually getting support from Zendesk themselves and you click log in, get a couple of buttons here. Zendesk have all the options enabled. If I click sign in using Twitter, basically I'm directed over to Twitter, and this is as a customer. Twitter says, we're requesting the permission to read your tweets and say you follow, but we're not requesting permission to post tweets for you. So if your customers are logging into Zendesk, there's no post that goes back on their Twitter stream that says, Stafford has just logged into Zendesk. We don't do that. We just use it for authentication. All right, so I wonder if it's in there yet. No, it doesn't look like it's there, but it'll be there soon, I'm sure. So that's Facebook. That's actually pretty much all there is to Facebook. When the ticket gets created inside of Zendesk, I'll show you what it looks like, and we can communicate back and forth. But this automation that I set up, where it automatically just pulls in posts from the Facebook wall, that's really a quick process. So let's move on to Twitter. Twitter's a little bit more complex, but complex in a feature-ridden good way. So the first thing to be aware of with Twitter is that if I go to twitter.com, you do need to have a Twitter handle. This is not something that we set up for you. You have to have a Twitter handle. You've probably already got a Twitter handle. In my book, I recommend having a dedicated Twitter handle. And I'll tell you why with a counterexample. If you're a very large company, and actually in the book I talk about Wells Fargo. So Wells Fargo have a Twitter handle @Wells Fargo. And if they were to use that Twitter handle as a support channel, the problem is that they've probably got 100 or hundreds of thousands of people following their Twitter handle. Mistakes happen. Mistakes happen occasionally, and in the support department, when you're starting to distribute, access to social media to more people, the risk of mistakes increases slightly higher. So you probably don't want to necessarily use the one that's got hundreds of thousands of followers. Maybe use a more dedicated support handle where mistakes are a little bit more tolerated. The other factor is just the fact that I think that when people go to Wells Fargo, they're going to be expecting announcements from the company or discussions about their banking. They're not necessarily going to expect conversations about support. And the fact is that if the conversations were about support, they might lose followers. So what I recommend is setting up a dedicated Twitter handle. Wells Fargo have, I think it's Ask Wells Fargo. I think Comcast has Comcast Cares. So these are dedicated Twitter handles to communicate with the support department. That's the first step, is to set that up. The next step is inside the product, inside Zendesk. We go to our channels, we open up Twitter and click Edit. And then we authorize the Twitter handle by clicking Twitter Accounts, add your first Twitter account, click Login with Twitter, and I'm going to put my username and password in there. Now, the expression I sort of give here is with great power comes great responsibility. I'm authorizing Stafford Vaughan, the Twitter handle now, for anybody who is on the Zendesk instance that I'm using, which means that somebody could just, in the support department, tweet out from that account. This is what I was talking about with the risks of mistakes with, the corporate Twitter identity. So just be aware that what you're doing is you are giving access to your agents to a Twitter handle. The only thing that that Zendesk can't do is see your Twitter password, as I've said a couple of times. All right, I'll authorize that up. So, Stafford Vaughan has now been authorized inside of Zendesk. Anybody with an agent account can start to use this. There is one setting on this that I want to emphasize a little bit. I click Edit on it, and it's this one here, Capture Public Mentions as Tickets. What this basically means is, do you want to manually find tweets in the Twitter sphere and pull them into Zendesk? Or do you want to, perhaps additionally, find everybody who mentions your Twitter handle? So if somebody tweeted right now to @Stafford Vaughan, it would automatically create a ticket inside of Zendesk. Actually, when a ticket's turned into when a tweet is turned into a ticket, we call it a twicket. And that's actually totally serious. If you go to twickets.com, it takes you into Zendesk. But there's actually a good reason for calling them twickets, and I'll explain that shortly. Now, the factors to work out. Do I turn this on? Yes or no? If the majority of people tweeting to you are saying, love your product, keep it up, then you probably don't need to turn them into twickets because it's not a conversation you need to engage in. If the majority of people are saying, hey, I'm having problems, can you help please? Then sure, you want to capture all public mentions so that you can help those people. It's just a simpler way of automating that. The other factor would be the number of requests you get per day. If you can handle 100 new tickets being created per day and there's 100 tweets, then great. But if you can handle 100 tickets per day and there's 1,000 tweets per day mentioning your company, that's probably too many for you to handle. So you should probably pick and choose in that case, and you should probably turn it off. But I'm going to say yes, automatically do it. I'm going to update the settings. The other tip I have is just on the general settings. It's pretty simple. See this option here, always include shortened ticket URL. That one specifically, I encourage you to disable. The way it works is that Zendesk will tweet out to a requester or to a person on Twitter with a link to continue the conversation. If you have this enabled, it'll tweet out that link every single time. If you disable it, it gives the option to the agent. I love the idea of giving agents the power to determine how the conversation goes. So I would disable that and click Save Tab. Okay, so Twitter is now authorized inside of Zendesk. But to be honest, aside from the fact that some tweets are being automatically converted, and by the way, it doesn't run like every second. There'll be a delay, so there probably won't be any created just yet. But you can get proactive with this. You can go out and create a search to find people who are talking about your company. Now, I recommend at the very least you create a search for your corporate Twitter handle, just to pull in anybody who's mentioning your company if you don't have that on automatically. I do recommend also that you search for just the text name of your company. I might have Stafford Vaughan as a search on Twitter just to see who's mentioning my name and then perhaps act on that. And then on top of that, I have @Stafford Vaughan without the space so that I can capture anybody who's mentioning my Twitter account. We do this by clicking Manage Searches. I'm going to configure my first saved search, and actually, since anyone mentioning the webcast, actually it's a cool little intersection of technologies where Yasmina specifically mentioned Zendesk. We'll see who's actually doing that. Cool. At least one person, which would be Yasmina. Nice. So that's good enough for the moment. Just hash Zendesk. I'm going to add that search. And by the way, feel free to pop up and start tweeting about the webcast, and you'll be made famous in the webcast. The way it works is that if I hover over any of these items, I can click Convert to Ticket, and it's going to convert it to a ticket. But if you've upgraded to the new Zendesk, and you might have been using the product for a while, you might have noticed that we didn't keep a feature, which is the saved searches. But there's a really nifty little workaround that we have, and this is actually not my workaround. It was somebody else on the Zendesk team. So they're very helpful with these sorts of tips. What I'm going to do is I right-click, and I say View Frame Source. And you can't see it at the top of my page, but you will be able to if let me move that down. See that link there? I just grab that. And I'm going to copy that now and move that back up again. Go back into the product. Since I'm an administrator, there you go, somebody's joining along. Since I'm an administrator, I can add what's called an app by clicking Browse and clicking the Sidebar option, Sidebar Icon option. I click Install. I put that URL in there, and I need to go find an icon URL. So I'm going to go search for Twitter Transparent. This guy here, Murray State University, has got a cool image that I can use. I'm going to copy that URL, and I'm going to paste it in here. What this screen is basically saying is we're going to add an icon to the side of your screen. Where does that icon go when it's clicked, which is the iframe URL, and what's the icon itself? And that's the other three. I'm going to call this my Twitter search, and I'm going to click Install. You do need to refresh the screen, so I'm just going to do that. It's kind of subtle, which by the way is a good thing, but see that little Twitter dude there? If I click on that, doesn't matter whether I'm an agent, doesn't matter whether I'm an administrator. What this takes me into, it takes me into the search that the administrator has defined. So let's say we're going to convert the ticket or convert to ticket. So this is how we create a ticket. The subject of the ticket becomes the tweet itself. You'll notice a lot of these fields that you've seen before. The most important part is what we write in the description. We'll say, thanks for the shout out. We'll leave it at that. Or let's say, here's a link if you'd like to discuss more. We have the option, of course, to tweet back to the requester, which I do want to do. And this checkbox here is for appending the ticket link. This is what I was talking about having the option to append the link. I'll click Create Ticket now. What happens is that ticket number 2 has been created. All I need to do is click on that link. And it's opened up ticket number 2. This is a ticket. I mentioned before, it's important to understand what's a ticket and what is not. Simple reason for that is that if it's a ticket, any additional information, just while it's on top of my head, you can provide, ? That right now is going to go back to O'Reilly Webcasts. So the entire conversation for support is inside Zendesk, and it's going to be broadcast back out. I know that because I've got an 81 on the right-hand side that tells me the number of characters remaining. So alternatively, I can say email only. Email only will mean that this just stays inside the ticket and it's not going to go out. So that's how you sort of keep the conversation inside of Zendesk. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over and have a look at my own Twitter profile. You can see here that it tweeted out and said, thanks for the shout out. Here's a link if you'd like to discuss more. This link, basically what it does is it jumps into Zendesk, into my particular Zendesk instance, and it challenges the user to log in as as O'Reilly Webcasts. Because of course that link is public. And so people think sometimes, if it's public, how do we know that everybody in the world isn't going to log in and start talking about that support conversation? The fact is that we have a mechanism that says that only the person that we sent the tweet to can log in, because we need Twitter to tell us, yes, this is O'Reilly Webcasts. That conversation, if it did continue inside Twitter, so it went back and forth, basically any time that O'Reilly Webcasts now tweets to @Stafford Vaughan, every time it's going to be added as a new comment on this particular Twicket. That's just the way it works. The conversation can go back and forth on Twitter, or the conversation can go back and forth inside of Zendesk. All right, so that's the way that Twitter works. Let me see if our Facebook ticket has been created. By the way, when we turn a tweet into a ticket, we call it a twicket. But when we turn a Facebook post into a ticket, we don't call it a ficket. That would be bad. So I just talked about changing channels a little bit. I said, this whole idea that sometimes it's better to start the conversation inside Zendesk and then continue. Sometimes it's good to start a conversation on Twitter or Facebook and then finish the conversation in Zendesk. It's what we call changing channels. And I have 7 good reasons to change the channel. One is the fact that 140 characters is very brief. If you're on Twitter, it can be quite difficult to solve a support request. Great mechanism to spark a conversation, not the best mechanism to solve a support request. The status can be a little bit more difficult to communicate in 140 characters. In theory, maybe you can put the status at the start of the tweet, but that would be a manual process. It's much better for people to get a sense of where the support request is when they log inside of or log into the product and continue the conversation via that medium. Having the full historical context of the conversation can be really, really useful, whether that's like in 3 days' time or 3 years' time. Twitter doesn't keep full history for your access. Zendesk does. So your customers can log in and see the tips that you gave them inside the product. Keeping your Twitter stream clean is always a big balance. I talked about one of the benefits of using this social media, integrating that with Zendesk, as the fact that people can see your conversation. But there's a big difference between seeing the conversation start and seeing the conversation end, and seeing every little bit of communication that goes on with the conversation. So try to start the conversation on Twitter and then get it in a more private place so you can have that conversation, and maybe at the end say, glad we solved your problem or something like that. Otherwise people they sort of tune out. Zendesk has some really good features where you can attach files, logs, screenshots. Yeah, you can do some of that stuff in Twitter. You could put a screenshot on Twitter, but you don't necessarily want to have a really public screenshot. You certainly don't want to have log files on Twitter. So that's a benefit of moving into Zendesk. I like to build communities with Zendesk around social media, people understanding that if they're on social media, they can talk to my support team. As part of that process, I think that if you take a conversation that's in Twitter and then move that into Zendesk, next time your customer might be inclined to use Zendesk instead. And that's, it's that balance again. Is public good or is public bad? Either way, at least they have the option next time. They understand that there is a support portal. They can log in and start a conversation inside the tool. Because last but not least, you've got the privacy concern, where keeping it inside of Zendesk just keeps it completely private. You can talk about whatever you want. It's an extremely secure tool. All right. There are many best practices that you could I could tell you about. I've got a bunch of them in the book. I wanted to just highlight 3 of them via very choicely chosen stock photography. The first best practice is don't give out usernames, don't give out passwords, don't give out credit card numbers. That seems pretty obvious, and most support team members are aware of this because you shouldn't be doing it inside of any support system anyway. But just be extra aware of it if you could when we introduce social media, because there's this level of public distribution of content. The next best practice is just change channels as quickly as you can. There's a reason that I dedicated a chapter today to talking about changing channels, and that is just start the conversation socially, try to close it more privately. And the last choice piece of stock photography is saying get to the point. It's that simple. On social media, you might be limited to 140 characters. So be aware of that. Get to the point. Even if you're on Facebook, you're not as limited, but people don't want to read your diatribe on Facebook to explain the support solution. Just say, here's a quick solution. Thanks for your time. And it's just the nature of the beast. It's the nature of social media that people are quicker. Support conversations, people are a little bit more patient sometimes. So that's the 3 best practices that I think are most important for you to be aware of. The next topic, and by the way, I'm playing around with the order of the topics just in case you saw that publicized on the webinar, on the webcast. Let's see if people are adding tweets. Okay, that is a good question. Wonderful to have that on the screen, actually, leveraging that. I don't know, to be honest, whether the Hootsuite integration has it. Ultimately, it's not going to be as well integrated as what it is inside the product, and that's going to be a balance that you'll have where you can either use Hootsuite with all its wonderful features and then have that integration, or just do it inside the product. I think doing it inside the product is more of a lightweight way of doing it. All right, so what I just want to talk about is how do we prioritize the social media conversations? How do we find them? There's a feature in the product called views. I'm sort of making a bit of an assumption that you've got some level of familiarity with Zendesk without giving you too much of a deep dive. If you're familiar with views, or even if you're not, I'm going to create a new view by clicking Add View as an administrator. And I'm going to call this the social media conversations. I'll set it so that it only finds the tickets that are unsolved, so less than solved. But the key here is the ticket channel. Basically what you can do inside the product is you can say, show me all tickets that were created using one of these channels. What is interesting about this is that even though we're only talking about 2 channels, Twitter and Facebook, Zendesk separates out those ones into 5 different options. There's 2 for Facebook's, one's for post, and one is for private messages. Once we've selected all 5 of those options, we can preview just to make sure it all looks good, which it does. There you go. Click Create View. The view's being created, which means that if I'm an agent, on the left-hand side of my screen, I can click the View button. I get the view. If I scroll down, it says Social Media Conversations. I'll click it, and it shows that one conversation. Still crossing my fingers for the Facebook ticket to be created. So that's how we prioritize them. That's how we get access to them. If you're an advanced user and you're familiar with concepts like triggers and automations, you can use the same method where we look for the channel being Twitter or Facebook in triggers and automations. And you can do some triggers allow you to automatically increase the priority of those tickets. Triggers would allow you to automatically assign those tickets onto certain groups, onto certain users. Triggers allow you to send an email to your social media department or to your marketing department to say that something came in from Twitter or Facebook. There's a lot of different business rules that you can define. There's a whole chapter on business rules in the book. I want to talk about macros. Just a very quick explanation of macros. Basically, macros allow you to predefine some actions that save the agent time, because when the agent responds to an inquiry, it's really quick for them just to click a macro and get the information that they need. So as an administrator, I can add a macro. And this one is just going to be Facebook response. And in here, we'll just say comment description. Thanks for expressing your concern. If you'd like to provide more details, sorry about the clicking sound, by the way. I hope that's not too bad. If you'd like to provide more details, please log in to our support portal, blueskies.zendesk.com. So just a little bit of text there. Click Create Macro. I don't know if our Facebook ticket is in there yet. Wow. Oh, there we go. Actually, that wasn't a Facebook ticket, but this was the person who, which is Jeremy, by the way, who tweeted to at Stafford Vaughan, obviously testing that rule that I set up that automatically pulls them in, and now this one's automatically being created. It didn't require any action by me to do that. So let's just, assume this was our Facebook ticket. I'm going to get rid of my draft there. What I did a moment ago was I created a macro, which has automatic text that might be useful in the context of Facebook. If I click Apply Macro and click Facebook Response down the bottom of the screen, it just very quickly says, thanks for expressing your concern. If you'd like to provide more details, please log into our support portal, blueskies.zendesk.com. If I submit that, now that gets posted back. Well, technically it gets posted back to Twitter now, but if my Facebook ticket had been created, it would have posted back to Facebook. So that's just one method of responding efficiently, is to leverage the macro functionality inside the product. All right, last topic I want to talk about is just how to analyze your social media impact. If I go over to, I go to GoodData.com. Let me see what we've got. All right, that's pretty good. So, GoodData in 10 seconds. It's a business intelligence platform. It's extremely intelligent, extremely advanced, and you get it completely free if you're on the Plus and Enterprise plans in Zendesk. What you get for free is the ability to do a thorough analysis of all your Zendesk data inside the GoodData platform, and it's all templated for you, basically. So what I'm looking at here is the template for what you get in GoodData, which is pulling information out of a sample Zendesk instance. The example that I want to show you is just the fact that on the ticket creation tab, if I click this created tickets by submission method report, what I get is a report that allows me to hover over this specific series. So Twitter favorites, another option there, and it shows me how many of the tickets that were created inside my help desk were created using the different social media platforms. There's no Facebook in here because this sample was created before we introduced Facebook in the product, but it would technically have Facebook posts, Facebook messages. It would have all of them in there. So that's the first piece, is you get this template. The second piece is the fact that if you're a little bit savvy, you can open up your tab, like the customer satisfaction tab, where we're looking at customer satisfaction across our entire Zendesk instance. And you can click this and edit it, edit the dashboard. It's super, super easy to edit things in GoodData, which is surprising considering how powerful it is. We click filter and then we click attribute. All I'm going to do is I'm going to add the attribute called buyer. That's the channel. Click add. I'm going to leave it at the top of the screen and click save. What I've done is I've added what we call an attribute filter to this page, which means that if I expand it out, turn off everything except Twitter, and then click apply, what we have now is we have an entire dashboard, which was a template. You get that with Zendesk automatically. but we have all the reports run just for conversations that were had starting in Twitter. So it's kind of neat, this flexibility that you get in the product. Most people see the templates in GoodData from Zendesk and they think, well, that can't be customized. But you can see that in about 60 seconds, I could customize the template to add a filter that just shows me social media. All right, looks like our Facebook ticket won't be created before the end of the session. So I just want to wrap up and just remind you of the fact, why is social media so important? Why is that line blurring so important to me? And the fact is that people are doing it. Your customers are communicating with you, and the majority of the time, or at least a very large portion of the time, they're communicating with you in a capacity that the support team are probably the best people to have the conversation. They're doing it because it's very easy for them to just tweet a simple conversation. It gives you an opportunity to give your community the impression that you care about your community, that you're willing to engage in conversations with your customers and solve their problem. The end result is going to be happy customers. Whether or not the customers deliberately wanted you to respond to their tweet, I think responding to any tweet and having that conversation or the Facebook post shows your level of interest. And then ultimately the benefit is that any ideas or any important knowledge that you have is going to be shared, and next time round, somebody might get that information without even asking for it, which is what we call self-service support, and it's always a good thing. Centralization is what it's all about. Somebody was asking about Hootsuite. You can use Hootsuite and Zendesk. You can use all the different social media platforms out there and Zendesk. Or you can set up Zendesk to pull the tweets and pull the Facebook posts in directly, transparently, and the agents can just live in one place, which is Zendesk. You can see I'm enthusiastic to see this ticket come in, this ticket come in. All right, so that's it. If there were any questions that you wanted to ask, I'm more than happy to answer those questions, or if you wanted to take over, Yasmina, and just let me know how you want to roll with the rest of the session, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you so much, Stafford, for presenting a really fascinating webcast. Really, really cool information you're showing us, and judging by chatter and conversation going on in our group chat, folks are really interested. Folks, we are at the Q&A portion now, as you heard, so if you haven't opened your group chat widget, please open it. Type in your question if you have one for Stafford for what he's been talking to you about and showing you, and he'll answer it while he's with us. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and I'm happy to read them to you. We have a question here from Christine Gordon. She'd like to know, she says, I am new to Zendesk and I'm not understanding the difference between groups and organizations and when I should be using one over the other. Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, the simple answer to that question is just that a group collects together the agents on your team. So your support staff will go into groups, whereas organizations collect together your customers. If your customers are all consumers spread all over the world from all different organizations, you probably won't use the organization feature. But if you're a company that supports other companies, you can use the organization feature to say, if somebody creates an account, they have a certain email domain, put them into that organization, and then let's provide a different level of support to that organization. Let's escalate new tickets from that organization to a certain person, and that's what they're used for. And you can basically build business rules around that.
Great, thank you. Question here from Brad. Brad says he joined the webcast a little bit late, but he is curious to know what is the average amount of time it takes the software to create a ticket, as it seems the Facebook ticket you were creating took a bit of time.
Yeah, that did take a long time. I don't want to play favorites too much, but the fact that the Twitter ticket was created immediately, the Facebook one was not, leads me to believe, and I have heard something to this effect, the Facebook API is a little bit more restrictive. I think Facebook API affects our ability to poll it and how frequently we can access it. It varies. Like I said, it was 30 minutes for me last night. Obviously, it's been about 40 today, and it's still not created. I've heard 5 minutes. It's really up to Facebook, I believe. Twitter is going to be created almost immediately. For whatever reason, their API is more tolerant of us polling it more frequently.
Thank you. Question here from James McLeod. He says, how often do you tweet or produce updates? He himself, he doesn't monitor Twitter constantly.
Yeah, it depends how often you sort of react to these. One solution is if you're finding that customers are only creating 5 or 10 tickets a day that mention your company, turn on that automated. Anybody who mentions your company, turn it into a ticket, and then just treat the tickets treat the twickets as if they're tickets. Like I sort of suggested that you should give some sort of special treatment to social media, but to be honest, you cannot give social media special treatment. You can just treat them like any old ticket, continue the conversation, just be aware of the fact that it is going to be a little bit more public.
Great. And let's see here. Question from Anthony. Anthony would like to know, are there tags or settings that can be created or filtered to help with what should be legitimate tickets versus spam type tickets?
Sort of. So I can demonstrate that one. If I go into triggers, for example, I can add a trigger where a condition is requesters' Twitter followers are greater than 1,000. I have another condition that says requester is verified by Twitter. I don't know if you've seen this verification concept, but large companies and public profiles have a little blue icon that says that they're verified. And so it's not going to stop spam per se, but it's going to help you to prioritize requests that are coming from definitely legitimate sources. The spam piece is it's around certain terms, and we don't look into that at this stage.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have a final question here. It's from Irina. She'd like to know if you can talk a little bit about open source software that's like Zendesk or similar to Zendesk.
But this is probably not the right meaning for that. To be honest, I think OTRS is probably the biggest competitor. You can go and have a look at that. The social media pieces in Zendesk is definitely ahead of the competition. And I know that's easy for me to say, but that's definitely one of the turning points. If you're interested in social media and using customer service platforms at the same time, I think Zendesk is ahead of the crowd.
Super. Okay, Stafford, I don't see any additional questions. Is there anything you would like to leave the audience with as we close out the program?
Just thanks very much for attending, guys. I hope you got a lot out of this particular webcast and are going to go off and do what I hope everybody does, which is embrace the fact that as support team members, you can work in the social media world because you're really the right people to be doing that. And I hope you enjoy reading my book. If you've got any feedback, I guess get it back to me somehow. Would love to hear your tweets if you're enjoying the book and so forth. Thanks, guys.
Super. And with that, we're going to say a very big thank you to you, Stafford, for presenting today's webcast, for sharing all your knowledge and expertise with us. Folks that attended, we thank you for attending and hope you benefited from us, from the event. And for those of you that sent in your questions, thank you for those questions because having your questions just adds that much more to our event, so we do really appreciate it. We'd also like to let you know that we did push out a code to you all in your group chat. So if you didn't open that group chat, please do. There's some valuable information there to save you some money as a thank you for attending Stafford's webcast. We have a special for you on his book. You can get it today at a really, really good price. So if you like what you heard and saw, the book has so much more in it that will really help you with your day-to-day. And as Stafford says, lots of best practices in there to help your organization. So we definitely encourage you to look at that. We'd also like to let you know to keep an eye out on your email because you might be receiving a special little offer from Zendesk, again, as a thank you for attending today. So, Stafford, thank you so much again for the webcast. Folks that attended, thank you. And this will conclude today's presentation. Goodbye, everybody.